Hello, friends. I've been thinking lately on some of the attributes of God, and especially the reality of His faithfulness, the goodness of God. It says in Deuteronomy 32:4, He is the rock, His work is perfect. For all His ways are law and justice. He's a God of faithfulness without breach or deviation. Just and right is He. Do we really believe and live in the goodness and the faithfulness of God? Are we hanging on to the reality that no matter what it looks like, He is a God who is faithful? It's become very real to me that if the enemy of our souls can cause me to doubt His faithfulness, I really have nothing to stand on. And I want us to look today a little bit into Isaiah 36 and 37, more in story form. And we've kind of alluded to it along the way, but I think we need to look at it a little closer today. In Isaiah 36, the enemy of the day is Assyria, and the king is Sennacherib. And Assyria, when you look into it, it listed in Nahum, and in some translations it lets you know they represent, the Assyrians and their ways represented evil counsel. And when you look at these two chapters, you so see that was the tactic of the enemy there, to bring evil counsel against the children of God. And in Isaiah 36, verse 4, the second part of that, it says, "What reason for confidence is this in which you trust?" He came to create doubt. Why are you trusting in God? What makes you think God's going to come through for you? And he, throughout this exchange, begins to rehearse his history and all the places he's taken down, the people he has devoured and destroyed. He even plants doubt against the leadership. Do you believe this leader is going to be able, Hezekiah, you think he's going to be able to help you? Do you know what we've already done? And then he says, what makes you think your God's going to stand up for you? We've already ruined these other places. Why can't we get Jerusalem? The people did not answer him a word because the king was wise enough to tell him, don't get into banter with the enemy, and we don't need to do that either. It's interesting to me when you look at it, though. Sennacherib, Assyria had already taken down all these other places and brought them under their control. Why was Jerusalem so important? Well, I know Jerusalem was important in the scheme of things, but for us today, I want us to look at what Jerusalem means. It means peace, even double peace. You see, when we look at this mocking spirit that is behind this evil counsel in Assyria, Sennacherib, we see an enemy that wants to come to steal our peace. Do you see that today? I certainly do. So Hezekiah was wise. He sent for the man of God, but it says he himself went to the house of God. We need to surround ourselves with godly counsel. That's true, but it can never take the place of us going to the Lord ourselves. Today, with everything swirling around us, so many people have so many opinions. I need first to hear from God for myself, because that's what I'm going to be able to stand on and in. And in verse 3 of 37, it says this, tell the prophet this. It's a day of despair, rebuke, disgrace. Children are ready to be brought to the birth, and there's no strength to bring them forth. You see, he was a wise man. He knew the time he lived in and the tactic of the enemy. The time he lived in was then, is now, always will be. There was something in his generation to birth. And the tactic of the enemy was to come and so mock their God and steal their joy. The joy of the Lord is our strength, that there was no strength to participate in the birthing process for their generation. And then as we read it, we see that it looks like the enemy kind of is sidetracked for a little while, but he never gives up on Jerusalem. And he sends a letter to Hezekiah, and he asks him, what really makes you think that your God is going to come through for you? Do you realize everything that I've already accomplished? Hezekiah takes this letter. I love this picture. And he goes to the house of God and he spreads it before the Lord. And it's like I see him just saying, Lord, come stand beside me and let's read this together. And after he reads it, he says this to the Lord. He prays, O Lord of hosts, you're enthroned above the cherubim. You are the God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. He's reminding God, this is who you are. This is who I know you to be. Incline your ear, O Lord. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see and hear all the words of Sennacherib, this evil counsel, this mocking, which he has sent what? To mock, to reproach, to insult, and defy the living God. That's what the enemy does to us. He comes to put doubt in us, so we begin to doubt the goodness of God. He comes to mock our God to us. It says in Daniel, in the latter days, he'll weary the saints by mocking their God to them. We're mockable, but God is never mockable. And then it's as if, to me, when I read this, Hezekiah was saying, Lord, do you see this? This is about you. This is about your name. Oh, yeah, they might take us down, but the reality is it's your reputation on the line. It's your name, not really us. You see, the enemy of our soul knows there's a bigger picture here than my own needs and wants. The bigger picture is, am I going to stand true to believing and standing for the faithfulness of God? Then he goes on. He doesn't candy coat it. He said, Lord, it's true. They really wiped out all these people, wiped out all these cities. But he said, you know, these gods they wiped out, they were not gods at all. They were wood and stone and the work of man's hands. See, God does not obligate himself to stand behind the work of man's hands. He stands behind what is born of his Spirit. And then it goes on, and when you read it closely, you see that there are some boundaries that the Lord lets him know. There are some boundaries. And then he speaks to him, and he says, now this is what's going to happen. I love this. He gives him a picture, and he said, you shall eat this year what grows of itself, and next year the same. And in the third year, sow and reap and plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. Like right now where we are, we're having to eat the fruit of where we are. I mean, there's just nothing else we can do. This is where we are right now. And it says there's going to be a crop from this down the road, but there's going to come a time, it says, where you're going to plant vineyards again and eat the fruit of them. In fact, it says the remnant that survives, I want to be a part of that remnant. I think that remnant is the one that's hung on to the reality of the goodness and faithfulness of God. The one that has survived, this remnant shall again, I love that word, again, take root downward and bear fruit upward. And then he goes on and he says, out of Jerusalem's going to go forth a remnant, a band that survives, and it says the zeal of the Lord will perform this. Zeal there means the jealousy. God is jealous over his people. He's jealous over what he has set his hand to do, and we can trust him. And then we know the story. They went to sleep, I'm sure, wondering what in the world they were going to do. And they awakened the next morning to 185,000 dead. They never had to lift a sword. Sennacherib, being, you know, the enemy always overplays his hand. He runs back to his pagan temple, and what happens? His own sons kill him by the sword. The fruit the enemy produces in time will do him in. In the midst of where we are, if we lean in to doubt, it leads to discouragement, which will lead to despair, and there's no life in that, is there? We need to return to the goodness of the Lord. We need to take authority over our mind. It says, I love this, in 2 Corinthians 10, you know it, the weapons of our warfare are not physical. They're not weapons of flesh and blood, but they're mighty before God for the overthrow and destruction of strongholds. Inasmuch as we refute arguments and theories and reasonings and every proud and lofty thing that sets itself up against the true knowledge of God, and we lead every thought and purpose away captive, don't we, into the obedience of Christ the Messiah, the Anointed One. We need to take authority over our mind and lead our thoughts captive to the reality of who God is. Right now is a good time to begin to think on who he is, study his name. We don't want to take a wrong turn, do we, in our mind? We need to keep our mind steady in him. I love a passage in Matthew 2, and it's speaking, I know, of the wise men and the birth and all of the story of Jesus. But I love this picture. In verse 12, there's just a little phrase, and it says, after they had seen the child and worshipped. Now, they had been warned, but this sentence says this, they went back another way. If we've been leaning into doubt, into fear, into despair, into discouragement, I pray that we go back another way in our mind and we let him hold us. When I took my children across the street, I didn't count on them holding onto my hand. I held theirs firm in mine. Let him hold you in his faithfulness and in his goodness. Step back into the reality of who he is. In reading recently, both in Jeremiah and in Hosea, it speaks that there would come a time that people would literally, I love this, they would literally tremble at the goodness of God. Do you believe that? I do. I can already tremble at how good he's been to me. I certainly haven't deserved it. And to close, in Nahum 1:7, it says earlier in verse 3, The Lord has his way in the whirlwind, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. Boy, we should be close to him right now, shouldn't we? It says, the Lord is good. He's a strength and a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knows, he recognizes, he has knowledge of and understand those who take refuge in him, those who trust in him. We can do that because he's faithful. Don't doubt it. Run back. Go back a different way if you've taken another route. God bless.